The message arrived at exactly 11:02 p.m. My phone buzzed twice where it rested on the kitchen table beside the neatly packed sunscreen bottles and souvenir bags I had prepared for the grandchildren. At first, I smiled, assuming Nathan was confirming some last-minute travel detail. But when I slid my reading glasses back on and lifted the phone, my heart cracked in two. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it only her family.
You've already done your part by paying.
I read it again. Then again. Each time, the words struck colder. No thank you, no apology, just dismissal, typed without hesitation, delivered without tenderness. I stared at the glowing screen until it dimmed, then placed it face down on the table, as if hiding the words might soften them. The house was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. The souvenir bags I had tied with ribbon only hours earlier sat ready. Keychains that read Aloha, Grandma loves you. My fingers were still sticky with tape. I had imagined their little hands opening those bags, imagined the laughter when they discovered matching trinkets. Now, all of that belonged to a dream I had clearly dreamed alone. Another message buzzed. Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. It's not personal. It's just simpler this way. Simpler. A word that cut deeper than anger. Simpler to erase me. Simpler to dismiss me from a trip I had funded, organized, and sacrificed for.
For 3 years, I had saved.
Every dime tucked away had been a promise to myself that one day we would stand together under Hawaiian skies, remembering James, their father and grandfather, the man who once made me laugh so hard on our honeymoon that I thought the waves themselves would stop to listen. But Nathan had redrawn the lines of family, and I was no longer included. I looked toward the duffel bag waiting by the door. Inside, 2 sundresses I hadn't worn in years, a framed photo of James the first plan to place at our dinner table, and a lavender candle meant to burn in his honor. I had imagined us barefoot in the sand, children's laughter circling us, each of us sharing memories of him as the sun slid into the ocean. Now, the image dissolved into ash. It wasn't only Tanya's eye rolls or her quiet corrections when I spoke to the children. It wasn't only the way she shifted every holiday to her mother's home without mentioning it until the last moment. It was her gaze, the way she looked past me, not through me but past me, as though I were a server who had already dropped off the bill. And Nathan had gone along with it. The boy who once drew me as a superhero, cape flying, under the words my mom saves the day. The son who once said I was his best friend. Now I was not family. I was a wallet. A convenient sponsor erased from the picture. The shame came first, thick, hot, and quiet. I felt foolish for having hoped. Foolish for thinking this trip would heal fractures, for believing love could still bridge distance. I picked up the phone, thought of calling Nathan, thought of asking him if he understood what those words had done. But I could not beg. Not after all I had already given. Instead, I walked slowly to the den, opened my old laptop, and pulled up the folder labeled Hawaii Travel Fund. There it was, the total I had worked toward since retiring, $21,763.84. Every envelope of cash slipped into a mason jar. Every late-night tutoring session despite aching eyes. Every skipped tea, every cold winter night with the thermostat turned down. All for this. My finger hovered over the option that read freeze account. A single click could pause all transactions. A single call could cancel every booking. But I didn't click. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new document and typed a different kind of list. Names. Carol, whose son hadn't spoken to her since her cancer diagnosis. Louise, newly widowed. Frances, who raised her grandchildren but wasn't invited to their graduations. Beverly, who told me no one had ever taken her picture on a beach. I saved the file, then returned to the banking screen. I clicked freeze. A message appeared. Are you sure you want to pause all linked transactions? I pressed yes. Another. All linked cards will be disabled immediately. I pressed yes again. Then I leaned back, placed the phone face down, and picked up the keychain meant for my youngest grandson. One by one, I unwrapped the others. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a different kind of trip. One where I was not erased, not a burden, not a line item crossed off, but a host. And I smiled, not with revenge, but with clarity. The morning after Nathan's message, I woke to silence. Not the comfortable kind that used to hum through our home when James was alive, but a hollow, brittle stillness. I moved about the house like a ghost, folding blankets already folded, wiping down spotless counters, straightening frames that did not need adjusting. The words kept echoing. You've already done your part by paying. I had spent 3 years saving for this dream. The mason jar in the cupboard had started it. Every time I resisted buying something small, vitamins, a new pair of shoes, a rented movie, I'd fold the bills into the jar. Eventually, I sold furniture, canceled my cable, and tutored English online long into the night, joints aching and eyes burning, just to keep adding to the fund. When I retired, I promised myself the trip would be my gift to the family. One last beautiful memory to hold us together. But I was never part of their plan. Tanya had been careful, quiet in her exclusions. At Thanksgiving, the photos were always just the kids. At Christmas, they wore matching red sweaters while I sat in blue, unaware of the theme. Birthdays, holidays, vacations, more and more often, they belonged to her mother's house, her family. I was included in name only, and Nathan, once so tender, had allowed it. The shame of it sank into me. I thought of the lavender candle packed carefully in my duffel, of the memory I had dreamed of by the fire pit, each of us speaking James's name, remembering him together. That dream had been reduced to a transaction. I had not built a bridge. I had built a pedestal they never intended to stand on. That afternoon, while checking my email, I stumbled across a message from the travel agency. Final itinerary, Hawaii family passage. I clicked, heart pounding. The list of names confirmed my suspicion. 8 tickets. 8 lay greetings. 8 guests registered at the villa. Tanya's family. Tanya's parents. Tanya's sister. Tanya's sister's boyfriend. Not mine. Not Marilyn. Not Mom. Not anywhere. Later that evening, Tanya called. Not Nathan, Tanya. Her voice was bright, falsely sweet. We're just finishing up packing. Everything's set on your end money-wise, right? I asked softly if she needed anything. Snacks for the kids, motion sickness bands, anything at all. Her cheerful tone cooled, hardening like steel. No, Marilyn. We've got it handled. Really, you should rest. Focus on you. Her words sounded kind, but the finality in them was sharp. They had never intended me to join. They were erasing me for my own good, as if that softened the blow. When the call ended, I went to the fireproof box in the closet. Inside were the papers. Every receipt, every statement, each tied to the account I had opened, the account I had built alone. Account holder: Marilyn Rose Monroe. No co-signers. No shared access. No alternate owners. Just me. I returned to the computer, opened the banking app, and stared at the total: $21,763.84. Every cent had been mine. Every sacrifice, every hour of tutoring, every skipped tea, every cold night. And they had treated it as entitlement, as their birthright, as if my love required no reciprocity. The banking app displayed the option again: transaction lock, freeze mode. A simple toggle. If activated, every card linked to the account would be disabled. No resort, no car rentals, no flights, no excursions. They would learn the way I had through absence, through silence. I hovered over the button, but did not click. Not yet. Because once you stop playing the part, the good mother, the generous grandmother, the silent supporter, there is no going back. I wanted to be sure. So I gave them one last chance. A message to Nathan: let me know if you'd like help with the kids' bags or snacks before the trip. I have extra motion sickness bands for Olivia. I watched as the little checkmarks turned blue. Read. But no reply. An hour passed. 2. Still nothing. That was when I knew. This was not miscommunication. Not forgetfulness. It was deliberate. They did not forget me. They erased me. And worse, they assumed I would accept it. That I would continue to play the role of the smiling, silent bank. But I am not just a bank. I am a woman who raised a son, who buried a husband, who carried more weight than most would ever see. And I still had choices. So I opened the Settings tab, hovered one final time, then clicked. Freeze mode activated. All transactions are now paused. Manual authorization required to resume. The screen updated with a soft chime.
Done.
I leaned back, breathed in, and took a sip of peppermint tea. No announcement. No accusation. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something stronger than anger, clarity. They had chosen entitlement. I chose freedom. For the next 2 days, I did nothing. When Tanya posted photos of beach hats online, I didn't comment. When Nathan sent a ready for takeoff message to the family group chat, I stayed silent. And when my granddaughter sent me a voice note about seeing sea turtles, I pressed it to my heart and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. Someone had to teach your parents the value of presence." And then I began a new spreadsheet. At the top, I wrote, "Those who deserve to be seen." Names of women who had lived lives of giving without applause. Women like me. And I began to dream again, not of being tolerated, but of belonging. The first call came just after dawn. My phone rattled against the nightstand, jolting me from shallow sleep. I didn't need to look to know who it was.
Nathan.
I let it buzz. A second later, another call. Then Tanya. I pressed the phone face down and pulled the quilt higher. At 7:43 a.m., the first voicemail arrived. Nathan's voice, brittle with panic. "Mom, something's wrong with the account. Our cards aren't going through. We're at the airport, and they're saying payment hasn't cleared. Call me back, please. Hurry." By 8:15, there were 7 missed calls. 3 texts. One from Tanya. "This isn't funny. Fix it.
Now."
I made tea instead. Peppermint again. I set the mug carefully on the windowsill, watching the light stretch slowly across the neighbor's garden. The world did not end because they were uncomfortable. The earth still turned. Birds still sang. The cat still curled in the sun. The only difference was that, for once, I was not carrying someone else's burden. By 9 o'clock, another voicemail. This time Nathan's voice cracked, lower, rougher. "Mom, they're asking us to step aside. Everyone's staring. The kids are crying. Just call me, please. We'll fix this later." I closed my eyes and breathed. I remembered the birthdays I spent alone after James passed, the holidays when Nathan forgot to visit, the times Tanya called me extra for wrapping gifts and ribbons, for cooking too much food, for daring to love loudly. And now, as strangers looked at them with judgment, I thought, maybe now you understand what it feels like to be left out in plain sight. At 10:12, a new email appeared from the travel agency. Reservation canceled. Funds returned to original account holder. A digital confirmation of what I had already known. They would not be going anywhere. Not on my sacrifice. Not on my back. I printed the email, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the folder labeled Hawaii Travel Fund. Not as evidence, but as closure. Proof that my choices had weight. By noon, the calls slowed. Tanya stopped texting altogether, but Nathan's attempts grew softer, more pleading. "Mom, I don't know what happened. We just wanted this to be special. The kids are disappointed. Please talk to me." But there was nothing left to explain. He had shown me what my place was in his new family. I had simply stopped paying rent on the space where they had caged me. That evening, I microwaved leftover soup and sat at the kitchen table with the candle I had packed for James. I lit it, watched the flame steady itself, and whispered, "You be proud of me." I didn't beg. The next morning, a knock at the door startled me. Not Nathan. Not Tanya. Carol, my neighbor. Her arms were full of laundry, and her eyes looked weary. "Dryer broke again," she sighed. I welcomed her in, guided her to the machine in the basement, and listened as she told me about her son, who hadn't spoken to her in months. Her voice carried the same cracks mine had the night before. Later that day, Frances called to ask if I wanted to join her for lunch. She spoke quietly, as if embarrassed, confessing her granddaughter had unfriended her on social media, told her she was too much. Louise texted about the silence in her house after her husband's passing. Beverly left a message about the way her family forgot to invite her on their lake trip. I wrote down their names again. Carol. Frances. Louise.
Beverly.
Not as an afterthought, but as a promise. They, too, had been erased. They, too, deserved to be seen. Meanwhile, Nathan's calls dwindled to nothing. By the third day, there was only silence. Tanya had blocked me on social media. No photos of beaches or palm trees appeared. The trip never happened. Their silence was meant to wound me. Instead, it freed me. Because silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is space. And in that space you can plant something new. So, I began to plan again. Not for them. Not for Nathan. Not for Tanya. Not for their carefully curated family portraits. I planned for women like me. For the forgotten, the overlooked, the ones who saved and sacrificed and were told it was never enough. This time, my list wasn't just names. It was itineraries. Beach walks at sunrise. Group photos where no one was left out. A candlelight circle for every husband, brother, or child gone too soon. Laughter over umbrella drinks. A reminder that we, too, deserve joy. And in the quiet of my kitchen, I smiled. Not bitterly, not vengefully, but with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Because the trip was back on. Only now it belonged to us. It started with a single call. Carol came over to return the laundry basket she had borrowed, and as we sat with coffee, I asked softly, "What would you say if I told you I still had a trip to Hawaii waiting? And what if I wanted you to come with me?" Her eyes widened, then softened with disbelief. Me? Marilyn, I couldn't. Yes, I interrupted gently. You could. And you should. Because people like us deserve to see the ocean, too. From there, the invitations spread like thread stitching a new quilt. Frances, who had raised 2 grandchildren alone. Beverly, who once confessed she had never owned a swimsuit because no one ever took her anywhere. Louise, still learning how to cook for one after decades of cooking for 2. One by one, they said yes. Hesitant at first, but yes. I handled the details the way I once handled family holidays, meticulously, lovingly. Flights booked under the second sunrise group. A villa large enough for laughter. Meals pre-planned, excursions balanced between adventure and rest. But this time, there was no silence at the table. No one looking past me. Each message I sent was answered with exclamation points and heart emojis. Gratitude bloomed where entitlement had once lived. The day of departure arrived with none of the old tension. No frantic calls. No double-checking if I was still included. We met at the airport gate like schoolgirls, Carol clutching her new sun hat, Frances carrying snacks for everyone, Beverly clutching her passport like it might fly away, Louise dabbing her eyes already. Strangers glanced at us, some with curiosity, some with envy, as we hugged and laughed louder than women our age were expected to. When the plane lifted, Frances reached for my hand. "I didn't know I'd ever get here," she whispered. "Thank you." I squeezed her palm. We all deserve to be here. Hawaii greeted us like a long-lost friend. The air smelled of salt and plumeria, warm enough to melt the years of neglect that had clung to our shoulders. A driver handed us each a lei, and Beverly laughed so hard she cried, saying, "No one's ever put flowers around my neck before." The villa overlooked the sea. From the lanai, we watched the waves roll in, and for the first time in years, I felt no heaviness. Only possibility. We filled our days with things small and grand. Early morning walks along the beach, our feet sinking into sand that held us steady. A hula lesson where we stumbled over our hips and laughed until our stomachs hurt. Snorkeling trips where Carol swore she saw a turtle wink at her. Louise stood waist-deep in the water and whispered her husband's name to the horizon. Beverly posed for photos in her very first swimsuit, radiant as a queen. Frances danced barefoot one night under the moonlight, her laughter carrying over the waves. And then came the evening of the candle ceremony. We gathered by the shoreline, a small circle of chairs, each woman holding a candle. The sun was slipping behind the ocean, streaking the sky with rose and gold. I lit the lavender candle I had once packed for Nathan's trip and said, "This was meant for James. But tonight, it's for all of us, for everyone we've lost, and for the pieces of ourselves we thought were gone. One by one we spoke. Carol for the son who had shut her out. Frances for the grandchildren she had raised but no longer saw. Beverly for the years she had given without ever being invited to rest. Louise for her husband, her partner of 42 years. When it was my turn, I said James's name aloud, felt it lift into the wind, and then I added Nathan's, not in anger, but in release. The tide carried our reflections back to us, candlelight shimmering across the water. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. That night, we sat on the lanai eating pineapple and laughing about everything from bad dates to old recipes. We took photos, dozens of them, and no one was left out of the frame. No one sat at the edge, unseen. We were all in the center. The trip lasted 7 days, but it felt like we lived a lifetime in that week. We came home with tans, souvenirs, and sand still stuck between our toes. But more than that, we came home with proof. Proof that joy belongs to us, too. That family is not always blood. Sometimes, family is chosen, stitched together from kindness, loss, and the courage to see one another. As I unpacked my bags, I placed one photo on the mantel. All of us lined up on the beach, arms around each other, laughing against the wind. I thought of the souvenir bags I had once prepared for children who never opened them, and I realized this picture was my souvenir. This moment was my gift. For the first time in decades, I was not waiting to be invited. I had written my own invitation, and it had been answered with love. The email started a week after I returned. Nathan's name appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Can we talk?" I sat for a long while before opening it. Inside, the words were careful, measured, as if chosen by Tanya's hand more than his. We had some unexpected expenses after the trip fell through. It would really help if you could cover part of what was lost. We can pay you back eventually. Please let me know. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had done. Just another request, another grasp at my wallet disguised as connection. I closed the email without replying. The next day, another arrived. "Mom, it's not fair for the kids to miss out because of money. Please reconsider." I stared at the line until my jaw clenched. It wasn't money that had cost his children joy. It was choices. Choices to erase me. Choices to take without gratitude. Choices to treat me as disposable. By the third message, he sounded more like the boy I once knew. "I don't understand why you're doing this. Aren't we family?" That was the hardest one to read. Because yes, once we had been family. Once I had been his safe place. But family isn't just blood. Family is seeing one another, valuing one another. He had forgotten that. I hadn't. I drafted a reply only once. It was short. "Nathan, I have already given enough. Please don't ask again." But I didn't send it. Instead, I whispered it aloud to the photo of James, then pressed delete. Because some lessons are not taught by words. They are taught by silence, by absence, by the space where something used to be. My silence would speak louder than any message. Meanwhile, life bloomed elsewhere. Carol sent me a postcard of the beach she visited on her own after Hawaii, the back scribbled with, "You gave me courage." Frances invited me to her granddaughter's wedding, proudly introducing me as my friend who reminded me I'm still worth celebrating. Beverly called to tell me she bought another swimsuit, this time without hesitation. Louise asked if I'd join her for Thanksgiving. We'll set a place for James, too. I realized then that I had built a new family. Not one I birthed, but one I chose, and one that chose me back. One evening, as autumn leaves rattled against the windows, we gathered again. Not in Hawaii, but in my own backyard. Carol brought her famous potato salad. Frances carried fresh bread. Beverly wore bright lipstick, and Louise set a candle in the center of the table. We lit it together, the flame flickering in the crisp air. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is our family. Not because of blood. Not because of obligation. Because we see one another. Because we choose one another." The women nodded, their eyes glistening. And in that moment, I felt freer than I had in decades. I kept the lavender candle on my mantel after that, a reminder not of what I lost, but of what I had found. I didn't stop loving Nathan. A mother's heart doesn't work that way. But I stopped waiting for him to love me properly. I stopped shrinking myself for a seat at a table where I was unwelcome. I had my own table now. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear James's voice in my memory. Warm, teasing, strong. You've always been braver than you think, Marilyn. And now, finally, I believe him. Because the greatest act of love I ever gave myself was this. I stopped begging to be included. I stopped financing my own erasure. I chose joy, I chose dignity, and I chose to be seen. That is my legacy. Not silence, not sacrifice without recognition, not the role of the invisible giver. My legacy is laughter on a Hawaiian beach, arms wrapped around women who had been forgotten but were forgotten no more. My legacy is a candle passed hand to hand, flame unbroken. And if anyone should ever ask me what I learned from it all, I will answer simply, love is not proven by what you pay. It is proven by who stays when the money is gone.